And notice, how do you explore your contact with the floor? If you're not directed, are you a systematic kind of start at the top or start at the bottom and go like a photocopier, you know, that neon light that kind of moves up and takes in all the details and compares left and right, or back the other way? Or maybe you're a right-lefter. Maybe you scan left to right or right to left. Or you could move your attention from place to place. And it's not that there's one right way to do it, as hopefully you're learning by now, but we want to mix it up a little bit. Try different ways of observing ourselves so that because when you do that, if you do it differently, something different might emerge. So I give you a moment to scan yourself. There's a sensation of the back of us. There's also the sensation of the front of us. Our back is commonly smaller, or we're less aware of it than our front because it's not in our visual field. So it's back there, behind. So what's your image of the length of your spine this morning? Gently roll your head a little bit. And notice, how does that echo? Does it? Do you feel any reverberation or ripple of the movement of rolling your head down the length of your spine in the direction of your coccyx without doing anything to make it happen? But maybe you might notice, if you listen, a subtle shift underneath your shoulders, or a subtle shift in pressure of your ribs in contact with the floor. One of the difficulties when we begin our journey in the Feldenkrais method is it can be very difficult to trust our observations, to trust our feelings, our sensations. That's one direction of the spectrum. And the other is that we can imagine, we can make anything up and we can project that onto ourselves, but it may not actually be happening in reality. It's our internal reality, but not in the objective world, which is why we need to get multiple references and multiple ways of listening to ourselves to compare and contrast. Please roll over and lie on your left side. Take hold of your right knee below your kneecap, or it can be your shin, whichever is more comfortable for you right now. Lift your right leg away from your left leg and begin to move it a little downwards. Remembering downwards is in the direction of your feet. But down has downness. It's not toward your... It could be that you're moving your knee towards the sole of your left foot, or it could be that you're moving your knee forwards of your left foot or behind your left foot. How clearly can you appreciate the direction that you're orientating your knee toward? And think that your knee is pulling your hand, which is pulling your arm, which is pulling through into your shoulder joint and your shoulder girdle. Can you feel your shoulder blade being moved across your ribs? Do you roll a little forwards as your knee moves downwards? And if you roll a little forwards, what's happening in your upper ribs on the right side? Your sternum. Is that changing its orientation to the floor? It can also change its orientation to your spine. It can tilt and slide relative to your spine. And just notice what sort of ambition you have this morning. Have you recovered from the disease of achievement? Or are you sick again? Have you succumbed? Okay, leave it, rest on your side for a moment. I notice for myself it creeps in every now and then. But how would it be to explore your way of moving for yourself in a way that you were looking for within a little bit, knowing the variations, the directions that have been given you, feeling your organization, and experimenting a bit with what is most comfortable for you in the direction that you're being invited to move towards, but not necessarily not trying to get it. And it's a paradox that we actually can find how to use ourselves more comfortably and pleasurably if we don't struggle and try to achieve. We can use that comfort, ease as a guide. Bring your right hand underneath your right kneecap again. And this time lift your knee towards 12 o'clock and move your knee a little bit downwards away from your head at 12. And take the time to do it here so you notice how much work you're doing in your hand. So the more work you feel in your hand to hold your thigh, probably the less clear it is how your shoulder girdle and ribs and head and spine might cooperate. So can you stay in the range that feels really easy? Moving your knee a little away from you so your foot, the sole of your foot, would head in the direction of the floor. And then come back a little bit. And then move your knee towards 11 o'clock and move it downwards and away from you. Can you feel a difference in what is evoked? What sensations of movement happen through your upper torso when you're moving at 12 compared to 11? And then what about 11:10? Lost my hours of the clock for a minute. So the clock's a vertical clock, or like the elevator dial, where 12 is towards the ceiling, 9 is towards the floor, in the front of you, lying on your side, or to the left of you if you're lying on your back, and 3's behind you, to the floor to the right of you, if you are lying on your back. And then move towards 9 o'clock and move your knee downwards and away from you. How are you breathing as you're doing this morning? So you know it takes babies hours and hours, weeks to learn to roll up to sitting. So use this time for your learning. And now gradually move back towards 12 and go towards 1 and move your knee away from you a little bit. And in each orientation of your knee in space on this half of the clock, can you feel little differences in the movement of your clavicle, your sternum? Maybe you'd like to put your left hand on your sternum or on your clavicle, on your ribs, maybe behind your neck. If you can, leave your head hanging. If you leave your head hanging or leave your head on the floor, it's asking the vertebra of your neck to do something that they may not usually do, and for the vertebra of your upper thoracic spine to do something that they may not usually do. So take your left hand away now and continue. Can you roll towards your back and taking your right knee towards the floor, towards 3 o'clock, but moving a little bit downwards at each hour. What's happening in your lower back as you roll from your side, as your knee goes further to the right? Can you feel that moment when your lower back, if your lower back tends to round backwards, where your pelvis tilts backwards? And how is your left leg cooperating? So if your left leg is bent on the side, as you roll across onto your back and then across towards your right side, does your left leg follow? So there's a certain amount of passive following where your leg is pulled along for the ride, and then there can be a moment where you lift it, you help it, so that it's continuing throughout your action to assist the direction that you're moving in space. Next time you go back to your left side, take a rest. When depends on you, but it is most likely, given the ATMs that we've been doing, is when you start rolling towards your back and when you're on your back. That's when it might serve you to continue the action of moving your knee downwards. Now on your left side, take hold of your right knee below your kneecap again. Put your right hand under your head for a moment. Sorry, yes. Your left. And move your knee forwards and downwards. Lift it a little bit away from your left leg and move it forwards and downwards. Just trying to explore that connection with what happens through the bones of your arm, your shoulder girdle, the upper thoracic vertebra, your chest and your head. Does your having your hand underneath your head, your left hand, give you information about when your head begins to roll? Could you help your head move a little bit forwards or downwards, or a little turning motion with the help of your left hand as you move your right knee downwards and away from you? Now here, where you have put your left hand could influence whether this feels easy or difficult or impossible. So try changing how you have the relationship of your left hand to your head. Can you find another way of holding your head or resting your head in your hand? And then continue to do the movement of your knee downwards several times. Can you find another way? A different relationship of your left hand to your head? One that might be useful or allow the movement of the head that you're discovering in this action. Please leave it, roll over and rest on your back. What do you notice? How has the movements you've been exploring, influenced, if they have or not, your way of lying on the floor? Please bend both knees, bring both knees over your abdomen and hold below your right knee with your right hand, your left knee with your left hand. And begin to open your left knee to the left. Let your right knee follow. And as you roll more towards your left side, begin to move your right knee downwards and away from you. And then come back. Then come back. So make it smoother, easier. Can you allow your head to roll as you move towards your left side, a rolling that is coming out of the movement of your torso and your spine, but then as your right knee moves downwards, with that rolling of your head, your nose might turn downwards a little and the lower part of your neck be pulled through the pulling of your arm with your knee downwards. Pardon? Then you're doing a different movement, probably. Or you're holding your head in a way that isn't clear to you yet. So we're looking for a folding. So, okay. Well, having the supports under your head is going to make a difference too. So there it's rolling forwards, forwards. Yeah. That's downwards. Your nose is going downwards. Oh, but you're arching. Well, is that necessary? If it's following, yeah, well, find out if you could do it without that happening. Okay, rest a moment. So I had, when I entered the training program, my training program, I was actually in a bit of a state. I'd had chronic pain for years. And what I discovered was that I needed to, my organization didn't really fit so well with the directions. And sometimes it would, and sometimes it wouldn't. And sometimes it made total not sense to me. And I needed to create a visual image of what a skeleton would do to find out what could happen, and then invite myself to move differently. It didn't happen spontaneously. I felt like I was the contradiction in the room. I'm sure I wasn't alone. But my habits of moving were so strong, and of pushing through and using my willpower to it, which worked pretty well. I just paid a price for it. I was in pain because I didn't listen to whether it was creating strain or not. So in the ATMs, you're invited to notice what does happen, what you spontaneously do, and think about what's being suggested. Try things on. And the way to feel whether one is easier than the other is usually to do less. And if we don't sense that one is easier than other, it may be because our organization elsewhere is prohibiting the easier possibility or way of moving. Or I've forgotten what the other one was I was going to say. Please lie on your left side. Oh, sorry, your right side. We didn't do left. Right side. Oh, rolling. I saw more rolling. And hold on to your left knee below the kneecap or below the shin. I mean, below the shin, if you push your knee downwards, the tendency is to extend your hip. So we used it as a strategy to create more differentiated movement through the length of the spine in the ATM yesterday. But only use your ankle now if it's not comfortable to do it the other way, because it's going to change the direction of your movement. And begin to explore. I'll bring your knee to 12. So hold your knee at 12. So your thigh is more or less vertical. And begin to move your knee a little downwards, away from your head, and then come back. And feel what happens through yourself on this side. Can you feel the pulling that comes from your knee pushing downwards through the bones of your arm into your shoulder joint? What sort of image can you have of your shoulder joint, your shoulder? Are you just thinking of the part of your shoulder that you put your finger on yesterday? Or is there more there that you could include in your image as you're exploring? And then move a little towards 1 o'clock. And then bring your arm back towards, bring your knee towards you a little bit, and then away from you. And then towards 2 o'clock. Feeling for those places through yourself that could participate, but that might actually be resisting or moving you in another direction than the one you're intending or endeavoring to intend to go in. And then gradually move your knee closer towards your right knee, your left knee closer towards your right knee. Feeling for sensing the relationship, the distance between your left knee and your right knee. And where's the height? What height of your left leg seems to invite more of you along to allow your knee to continue its downwards path, forwards and downwards? How do you breathe as you're doing this? Well, yes, you breathe in and you breathe out, but can you use your breathing as a guide? Because as soon as you stop your breath, which tends to happen when we want to try and get it, then you're stopping it with the very muscles that need to be able to reorganize themselves to allow your spine, your chest, your head, your shoulder girdle to follow the direction of your leg. Fatiguing? That you're working that part fairly strongly? Fatigue can come from a couple of different things. It can become because you're not used to using your muscles in a particular way, or it could be because the work that you're doing is working against the resistance of somewhere else, and so yet you haven't discovered the way to soften what's happening or to involve more of your torso. Because no, it doesn't need to happen. Doesn't mean it's going to go immediately. Try bending your right leg up a little more. Mm-hmm. It's coming. Yeah. Okay, roll over and lie on your back for a moment. And what do you do when you feel fatigue? Can you allow yourself a pause before you get fatigued? How soon do you notice fatigue? The lessons we need to learn are often the most difficult. So I think I was alluding this week to, I'm a bit of a worker. And for me to know when I needed to rest, it was usually when the job's done or I was stopped by something else. So learning to recognize gradations of fatigue, to have multiple indicators or signals that we can listen to, can be really useful. Please bend your knees. Bring them over your torso. Hold below your right kneecap with your right hand, your left kneecap with your left hand. And just for a moment, play. Just play. rolling side to side, feeling the opening of your legs. Could you make that rolling feel really delicious, really pleasurable? And just find out what happens. In your play, can you be aware of, have a more global awareness of yourself? And maybe there's a detail, some part of you that you're interested in highlighting for a moment. And then you bring it back into the big picture. What happens if you roll a little faster? Can you leave your head on the floor? Uh-huh. Still feel the opening of your knees so they're wide open when you're on your back. The leg of the side you're rolling to continues to open to the side as your upper leg follows. And then gradually begin to include this idea of finding a moment when you go towards one side, the upper leg can move downwards and away from you. Your head can stay low, but it might be lifted away from the floor through your arm that is lengthening. Okay, the next time you're on your back, stay there with your knees over your abdomen. Bring your arms above your head on the floor. So somewhere where they can lie comfortably. If they need to be out to the side. So remember, above the head just means in that direction. Your elbows on the floor if you can. So if you need to spread them a bit, yeah. Now, do you remember the first lesson we did this week? Cake Monday. Where we swept, one of the final movements was sweeping the arm above the head on the floor over to the other side. Can you begin to use so if you're rolling to the left, sweep your right arm on the floor overhead in a big arc and then take it downwards in the direction of your right knee as your right knee moves downwards and away from you, and then come back onto your back. So now you're tracking. So instead of having the feedback from your hand on your knee, you need to track where your hand and your knee are in space and what's happening through the rest of yourself. And what's your left arm doing? Is that moving also? Or does it kind of get left behind as a weight? Or is it... Try rolling to the other side, to your right side. So you roll to your right side, your left arm sweeps above your head long. You roll over the ribs on your right side, your right leg finds the floor, and your left leg moves downwards and away from you, keeping it bent, while your left arm sweeps on the floor in front of you to follow your left knee. Can you follow the pathway of your head through space. Feel the arc that it's making. It doesn't move in a straight line, moves in a big sweeping arc. What else moves in an arc? The arm that's sweeping overhead moves in a big arc. And the moment where we feel the flow of the movement is interrupted or there's a speed hump, that's the moment where we've probably lost some part of ourselves out of the image. So if you can catch that moment and try and sense your whole self, find out what is it that disappears in your image. Or is there some cross motivation? Maybe some part of you starts to head off in a direction that's not congruent with the movement. Okay, take a rest on your back. Notice if you sense your way of lying on the floor to be a little different now. Can you notice what or where you feel different? Is the way your lower back or your pelvis is lying changed? Feel like there's more of your pelvis or less of your pelvis in contact with the floor? Does your pelvis feel lighter or does it feel heavier? And what's the sense of the length of your spine? Bend your knees, stand your feet. Gently roll your head and see what that's like now. And then you can leave that. Roll yourself to one side. Slowly pause in sitting if you feel like it. And then when you're ready, bring yourself up to standing. Notice if there's something that comes into your attention in your standing. Could be whether you feel lighter or heavier, taller or shorter. Could be something in how your arms are hanging. It's different. It'll be different for each person, and every ATM can create subtle differences. Some can be similar, but different. And then when you're ready, walk around for a moment. And again, take a few moments to observe yourself in walking. What sense you have of yourself, in yourself, and of yourself in the room. And we'll take a 20-minute break.